Exactly. That damage is the heart attack, coronary attack, myocardial infarction, MI, cardiac arrest, different name for the same underlying event caused by this structural setup. The end artery nature means if oxygen is blocked, that muscle dies, sometimes fatally, which is why getting treatment fast is absolutely critical. You're fighting against anatomy that lacks redundancy.
That really does set the stakes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's trace the path of this blood flow, starting with the right coronary artery, the RCA. Where does it actually begin?
So the RCA, it pops right off the aorta, specifically just above or superior to the right cusp of the aortic valve, right at the exit of the heart's main pump. And it immediately runs in that groove, the one that circles the top part of the heart between the atria and ventricles. That's the coronary sulcus. Coronary actually means crown because it sort of sits like a crown. It runs along the front, then curves around to the back in that sulcus.
And what are the key branches off the RCA that are doing the important work?
Well, one of the first major ones is the SA nodal artery. This one's vital because it feeds the sinoatrial node, the SA node. That's the heart's natural pacemaker. It sits right where the big vein, the superior vena cava, enters the right atrium. So block this artery, and you could disrupt the heart's basic rhythm.
Okay, pacemaker supply. Then, as the RCA keeps going,
As it tracks along the side, it gives off the right marginal artery, sometimes called the acute marginal artery because of the sharp acute angle it makes. But functionally, the key thing is it supplies the muscle all along that right edge or margin of the heart.
got it, and then following it all the way around to the back.
Yes, around to the posterior side. That's where we usually find its most critical terminal branch,
hmm
the posterior descending artery, the PDA. Now, because it runs down the wall between the ventricles, the interventricular septum on the backside, it's also known as the posterior interventricular artery. Same vessel, two names based on location and function.
Okay, the PDA. That sounds important. And you mentioned this ties into coronary dominance. Let's pause here and unpack that concept. What determines which artery runs the show back there?
Right, dominance. It sounds complicated, but it's actually defined by one single thing. Which artery gives rise to that crucial PDA, the posterior descending artery? Whichever artery feeds the PDA determines the blood supply pattern for basically the entire back wall of the ventricles.
So what's the most common setup? What do we see most often?
The most common, by far, somewhere between 60% and maybe even 80% of people, have what we call a right dominant heart. In this setup, the PDA comes directly off the right coronary artery, the RCA. That's kind of the textbook picture, the anatomical default assumption.
Okay, 60 to 80% right dominant. What about the others?
Well, a smaller percentage, maybe 10–15%, have a left dominant heart. Here, the PDA actually originates from the left coronary artery system, usually the left circumflex branch we'll talk about. And then there's a really small group, maybe 5–10%, who are co-dominant. In co-dominance, the PDA gets blood supply from both the RCA and the LCA systems.
Does this dominance pattern matter beyond just knowing where the PDA comes from? Does it affect anything else critical, like the electrical system?
Oh, absolutely. It has huge implications, especially for the electrical conduction system. There's another vital little artery, the AV nodal artery. It supplies the atrioventricular node, the AV node. That's the critical relay station that passes the electrical signal from the atria down to the ventricles, making them contract. And this AV nodal artery usually arises right at the crux of the heart.
The crux.
Yeah, the crux is basically the T intersection on the back of the heart, where the groove between the atria and ventricles, coronary sulcus, meets the groove between the ventricles, interventricular sulcus, a key landmark. And in right dominant hearts, which is most people, the AV nodal artery typically comes off the RCA near where the PDA originates.
So if you're right dominant, the RCA is potentially supplying both the main pacemaker, the SA node, and the main electrical relay station, the AV node.
Often, yes. That places a huge amount of functional importance on that one vessel, the RCA, in the majority of people. If that dominant RCA gets blocked, you don't just risk losing muscle tissue on the back and right side, you also risk major electrical problems, heart block, arrhythmias. It's a double whammy.
Wow. Okay, so that's the right side in dominance. Now let's switch over to the left coronary artery, the LCA. This one's famous for being short, right?
Very short, often just, maybe 2 to 3 centimeters long. It comes off the aorta just above the left aortic valve cusp. And almost immediately, it splits, it bifurcates.
Why so short before branching?
Because it has a massive territory to supply, primarily the powerful left ventricle. So it branches quickly to cover that area. It's short, but incredibly important. Clinically notorious, actually.
All right, let's talk about those main branches, the big two.
Okay, the first one, and probably the most well-known coronary artery, is the left anterior descending artery, the LAD. Just like its name says, it descends down the anterior surface, the front of the heart, and it runs right over the interventricular septum on the front side. So its other name is the anterior ventricular artery.
The ELAD. And this is the one people sometimes call.
The Widowmaker.
Yes. Why does it get that really stark nickname?
It gets that name because of the sheer amount of critical heart muscle it supplies. It feeds a huge portion of the left ventricle, that's the main pumping chamber for the whole body, plus the front 2/3 of the septum and often the apex, the tip of the heart. If you get a significant blockage high up in the LAD before its major branches take off, the amount of muscle that loses blood supply is massive and sudden. The impact on pumping function can be catastrophic, and survival rates can drop dramatically without immediate intervention. It truly supplies the highest stakes territory.
Okay, so LAD, the Widowmaker. What's the other main branch off that short LCA stem?
The other major branch is the left circumflex artery, or LCX. Circumflex just means bending around something, and that's what it does. It heads off to the left and curves around the side of the heart in that same coronary sulcus, heading towards the back. It supplies the left side wall, the lateral wall of the left ventricle.
Does circumflex have important branches too?
Yes, it gives off marginal branches as well, just like the RCA did on the right side. These are typically called left marginal arteries, or sometimes obtuse marginal arteries. Again, the name refers to the angle they make as they branch off. But the key takeaway is these marginals coming off the LCX supply that lateral wall of the left ventricle.
Okay, so we've got the RCA feeding the right side and usually the back, and the LCA splitting into the LAD for the front and septum, and the LCX for the left side and part of the back. That covers the supply. Now, the blood delivers its oxygen. How does the used deoxygenated blood get back to the right side of the heart to get reoxygenated?
Right, the return journey. So the veins that drain the heart muscle, they don't just dump randomly back into the chambers.